It's Brian Clarke, birth name Bernard Francis Clarke. I am the former chairperson of Sinn Féin Newry, from which I resigned in the constituency of Newry South Armagh, current MLA and former MP for the area, Conor Murphy. I am very reluctant to make this video, my first video publicly, on Irish politics. I'm not a politician, I'm not in any party, I'm not with any organisation, but as the founder of the office in Newry and former chairperson there in that constituency, I feel a responsibility to comment on the condemnation yesterday, because essentially that is what it was when he stated that the execution of Lord Louis Mountbatten in Ireland during Britain's Dirty War, latest episode in it, was indefensible. Essentially, that is a condemnation of the former provisional IRA and his former comrades. And Mr. Murphy, was a minister in the corrupt establishment of Stormont, the Parliament for the north of Ireland. They occupied 6 counties. Former MP, member of the House of Commoners, or MP, for that area. So to see a person who, within the party that called themselves Irish Republicans, condemn with a statement the execution of Lord Louis Mountbatten was indefensible. Reading from his piece, in which I will furnish the link later and have already posted to many groups on Facebook and on my profile. This is what he said about him. I'll go back to the last part he said, what he stated about the execution of Lord. Now just bear in mind, this is an Englishman, apolitical essentially, from what I see. Contrast that to what this so-called Irish Republican, in a so-called Irish Republican party, states and condemns. The presidents of Ireland, Patrick Hillery and the Taoiseach Jack Lynch at the time, attended a memorial service for Mountbatten in St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin on the 5th of September 1979. Just goes to show how easily the enlightened public are made mugs of, doesn't it? You see, Lord Louis Mountbatten was an abomination of a man who should in fact have been removed from this earth years before the IRA did us all a favour. That's what an Englishman wrote about that. And to put it further into context, Lord Louis Mountbatten was executed or eliminated by the IRA back in 1979 during the last episode, and which is still currently still alive, still active, of the British Dirty War in Ireland, a war of occupation in Ireland, visited Ireland. Reading from his piece, in which I will furnish the link later and have already posted to many groups on Facebook and on my profile. This is what he said about him. I'll go back to the last part he said, what he stated about the execution of Lord. Now just bear in mind, this is an Englishman, apolitical essentially, from what I see. Contrast that to what this so-called Irish Republican, in a so-called Irish Republican party, states and condemns. The Presidents of Ireland, Patrick Hillery, and the Taoiseach, Jack Lynch, at the time, attended a memorial service for Mountbatten in St Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin on the 5th of September 1979. Just goes to show how easily the enlightened public are made mugs of, doesn't it? You see, Lord Louis Mountbatten was an abomination of a man who should in fact have been removed from this earth years before the IRA did us all a favour. That's what an Englishman wrote about that. And to put it further into context, Lord Louis Mountbatten was executed or eliminated by the IRA back in 1979 during the last episode, and which is still currently still alive, still active, of the British Dirty War in Ireland, a war of occupation in Ireland, visited Ireland. First Earl Mountbatten of Burma, KG, GCB, OM, GSI, GCIE, GCVO, DSO, PG, FRS, born Prince Louis of Battenberg, 26th of June 1900, known informally as Lord Mountbatten. He was a British statesman and naval officer, an uncle of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and second cousin, once removed, to the present Queen of England, Elizabeth II. He was the last Viceroy of India, 1947, the first Governor-General of an independent Union of India, from which the modern Republic of India emerged in 1950. From 1954 until 1959 he was First Sea Lord, a position that had been held by his father Prince Louis of Battenberg some 40 years earlier. Thereafter he served as Chief of the Defence Staff until 1985, making him the longest serving professional head of the British Armed Forces to date. During this period, Mountbatten also served as chairman of NATO, of the NATO Military Committee during that time. Pretty impressive, don't you know? Alright, so that's the background to Lord Mountbatten. Moreover, what people of a certain age know, that in 1979 Mountbatten was executed by the Provisional IRA, who had planted a bomb on board his boat, the Shadow 5, at Mullimore, County Sligo, in Ireland, in resistance to British occupation in Ireland of the 6 northeastern counties of Ireland, which has cost the lives of men and women, volunteers trying to liberate their country. Right, to put it further into context, that description by an Englishman is further elaborated later on in the following manner. I don't know if I already stated this. The President of Ireland, Patrick Hillery, and the Taoiseach, i.e. the Prime Minister, attended a memorial service for Mountbatten in St Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin on the 9th of September 1979. Just goes to show how easily the enlightened public are made mugs of. You see, Louis Mountbatten was an abomination of a man who should in fact have been removed from the earth years before the IRA did us all a favour. Now that's coming from an English commentator. Now to contrast that to what Mr. Murphy said yesterday when he was condemning the Act and his former comrades in the Provisional IRA, when he said this was indefensible. Now, albeit innocent people were killed while this happened, but bearing in mind the record, and I will furnish the link as I've furnished many times already in various groups yesterday, on Lord Louis Mountbatten's background. It saved the life, hundreds of lives of Irish children alone, never mind internationally. It saved them from child rape, which was a continuous activity of Lord Louis Mountbatten. Now the part about the rape of Irish children, in fact, it has continuously jumped to the defence of the establishment, a lot, not alone in this and that instance, other instances, but in this instance, in defending Lord Mountbatten and the British and the Irish political establishment, while ignoring the pleas of innocent Irish children victims of child rape on an endemic scale, particularly with their own party members. Now, I don't want to go further on that because people who care to risk and people want to investigate these facts can go to this link, which has been published already in many groups and on my profile, Bernard Francis Clarke, on Facebook. So the reason that I'm reluctantly on a video, the first time on a video, because I prefer have a private life of sorts, is because this matter, frankly, has made me sick. And I felt like vomiting when I read it first. Because I know Mr. Murphy's family well. And they were volunteers. They were activists, political activists, Irish activists in Ireland. But my last engagement with them in South Armagh was the many decisions made democratically in this, including the selection of Tom Lonergan as candidate for Newry South Armagh in the first Stormont elections that Sinn Féin engaged in, which I proposed Tom Lonergan. He was a man of integrity and a traditional Irish Republican, and was unanimously endorsed by every member at the selection committee for candidate for that area. This was overturned later by the Murphys and what they called the House of Lords in South Armagh. Now, his mother Alice, and asked him about the House of Lords in South Armagh, which, as an aside, to Stormont, the Parliament Stormont, which has no say in whether Ireland, or that part of Ireland, stays within Britain in Brexit or leaves the European Union. The House of Lords in England have more say in this Irish matter than the corrupt Parliament of Stormont. In fact, the Irish people in that part have no say in the matter. And Sinn Féin choose not to inform their constituents about the facts of this matter, or a hard border, even harder than before the Bad Friday Agreement, which, you know, Mr. Murphy and his constituents is well aware of. But to ignore the victims of paedophilia on the scale of the history of Lord Mountbatten, and to come to defence of Mountbatten and the British and Irish political establishment, as opposed to giving help, as his colleague Gerry Adams enabled the rape of Irish children and relatives. And in this instance, to come to the aid and condemn Irish Republicans and condemn an act of resistance to the occupation of Ireland in Britain's dirty war in Ireland, which is still continuous. And to ignore and administer the internment of Irish political activists in non-democratic courts, in kangaroo courts, administer this since the start of the recent troubles, or the current dirty war by Britain in occupied Ireland, is the height of hypocrisy, while in the process calling himself an Irish Republican, or calling themselves an Irish Republican Party. Most of these former comrades of these Irish people, so is Conor Murphy an abomination, and his party, calling themselves Irish Republicans and condemning the acts of resistance of Irish Republicans, both alive and passed on. So this has upset me greatly, to the point I have to make this video. But I ask you to share it, and share the details of the life of Lord Mountbatten in the link provided underneath this video, and to challenge Murphy and his colleagues on the hypocrisy and the lies around these events, which continue to get mainstream media attention, while Irish Republicans or dissidents, or whatever you choose to call them, or activists, or resistance, essentially, are censored, both in Ireland and abroad. This is a British dirty war of occupation in Ireland, and people like Murphy and his parties enable the agony to continue, and in fact censor and censor and participate in the murder using false flags names of such as the UVF and other young men in South Armagh. People who are aware of what's happening in Ireland know the names of these people, know what actually happened. Right. This is the same activity as the black and tans, the blue shirts, fascist blue shirts in Ireland, and Sinn Féin are far from Republican. They are a continuation of this fascist intimidation of democratic free speech in Ireland. And I am telling you now, Conor Murphy, and your colleagues, I will defy you, and there's many people like me, and the truth will out. But your condemnation of former colleagues and Irish Republicans and the Provisional IRA is hypocritical, to say the least. It's an abomination, as was Lord Louis Mountbatten. That's all I have to say.